This is the Adult and Pediatric Institute podcast, a podcast where we get real, we get messy, and we talk about all of the things with your host, Nicole. We have with us someone who is doing a lot of really exciting things, and I'm going to share a quick little something after I introduce him to share with you guys the connection here. His name is Rob Gorski. He is an award-winning blogger, and he has the autism podcast, the Autism Dad. So thank you, Rob, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So, okay, quick little story, and I told you I was going to share this once I once I hit record because I wanted the listeners to hear this connection because it's really cool. We just brought on a new community outreach liaison. Her name is Melissa, and she has been a client of our practice for a while at the Adult and Pediatric Institute. And both of her kids have autism. And when she found out the other day that you were coming on the podcast, she wanted me to pass on a note to you that her husband, Sully, when their kids first got diagnosed, your podcast, The Autism Dad, was one of the first podcasts he had found and started listening to help him better understand his children. And she wanted me to tell you that your podcast has become a bit of a lifeline for him.
Oh,
So
thank
it's,
you.
yeah, it's like a really cool connection.
I,
It just got
yeah,
brought up very naturally.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I,
So
I
you're
really, that's a great way to start the day, actually.
right. Isn't that
Yeah,
nice?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, Especially with everything we face as autism parents, sometimes you get
Mm-hmm.
bogged down and you forget the difference you're making in the world. So you definitely made a difference all the way down here in Florida with an autism dad who
Thank
listens
you.
to every episode, apparently, from what I've been
Well,
told.
I appreciate that. He's welcome to come on anytime and share his journey if you'd like to do that.
Oh, very cool. I'll
We
let
don't get
him
enough. We
know.
don't get enough dads,
Yeah.
so let me
Yeah,
know.
I definitely will let him know. So, tell us a little bit about your personal journey and what inspired you to create the Autism Dad podcast.
I'm a single dad to three autistic kids, all in various places. My oldest, well, I guess his journey is what sort of inspired the start of all of this stuff 17, 18 years ago, something like that. He developed very typically. He was actually advanced speech and language, and then around the age of 4, it was like, well, you put into bed Gavin, and he woke up somebody else. It was just this profound global regression. It was so profound that I ultimately was grieving the loss of a child that I still had, which is a really hard concept for people to understand, I think, because thankfully not a lot of people have had to deal with that. And I was really struggling with, grief and just trying to process everything. And I started writing. I was using this WordPress site that I created, and I thought that it was private. I was using it as like a journal, you know, back then. And I later found out that it was public. And so I started getting emails and messages from parents who'd been reading it. And I was mortified because I was like dumping emotionally onto this,
Yeah,
thinking it was like a private
you
whatever.
probably felt
Yeah.
very naked in front of all of these people.
That's a great way to that's a great way to describe it. I never thought
Yeah.
about it like that. But there was nothing bad. It was just when you're going through stuff like this, parents feel like they can't have feelings about what's going on, right? There's a lot of taboo and shame around grief and frustration and all that stuff. And I
Yeah.
was just thinking I was talking to myself,
I
you
talk
know?
about that a lot, and I love that you bring that up because that is so important. And you do grieve. You grieve the loss of what this child you anticipated them to become. And
Hmm.
now all of that has changed. And now what will they become?
Yeah. And it kind of took off from there. And what I ultimately found was that like, it was very therapeutic for me
Mm.
because I was able to use writing like part of my process for dealing with everything, right? It was like a lifeline for me. And it was helping other people out because then they were connecting and, recognizing that they weren't the only ones feeling a certain way or dealing with whatever. And back then, and there was nobody else doing that online. I was like, if you were to do a search for autism back then, it was YouTube clips of Rain Man or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I started doing this, I'm really weird about organization. So I like organized everything and tagged it and whatever. It got indexed into Google. So when you would search for autism, you were finding what I had intended to be like my private journal.
Yeah.
And so that's how the whole thing got started. And
Oh
and
my
then
gosh.
uh so we're what season 8 now. So probably how about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I started the podcast. Gavin really struggled for a long time. While we were dealing with his diagnosis and behaviors and the struggles and everything, we had two other kids, Elliot and Emmett. Elliot, he's the middle child, but he was the last to be diagnosed. Our youngest, Emmett, at the time was non-speaking, and he didn't really start talking to. He was about 4.5 in that area. He was ultimately diagnosed, and then Elliot was diagnosed shortly after that. And so it just became this, I don't know, it was just sort of a direction to go in, and it was great because I'm able to help people, and then everybody sharing their stories and their experiences helped me to better understand my kids and be a better dad, especially the autistic adults that would share their insights and stuff because I learned so
Yeah.
much from them. Right, Ellie and Emma are doing very, very well. Gavin's doing well. He moved out ultimately, and he just got a new job. He had his first job 2 years, but he wanted better hours and pay and stuff, so he went and got himself a new job. It's amazing.
That
Um,
is amazing.
and so we've all just kind of been involved in raising awareness and all of that stuff ever since.
I love that. And I bet you because you thought that that site was private,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of what led to the popularity of the site, I guess I could say, because it probably resonated with so many people because you were the first one really just out there talking about what this really feels like on the parent side of the journey.
Yeah. In fairness, I feel like I just sort of fell into this.
Hmm.
Um, and people, they appreciate the fact that it's very authentic and transparent, and I share all the mistakes that I made. It started out that way because I didn't think anybody was going to read it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
there
but
was
that's what
no
I'm saying. That's
yeah, there was no
probably,
inhibition on my end.
yeah, there
Like,
was no filters there. You weren't
yeah,
writing to a specific demographic. You weren't writing to get popular. You weren't writing to make money off of the blogging life. You were writing from your heart and your fears, I would imagine. And all of these things, just word vomit on a page. And that's, I think, what people need more of is that authenticity and that transparency of it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
yeah. And Gavin really, really, really struggled. We were having to look at residential placement for safety reasons because there was just so many extreme behaviors, and it was a very sort of real time because I was writing like, I don't know, a dozen times a day, and it
Wow.
was written in real time because the way that I was doing it is I was doing it from my phone. And if we were dealing with something and I needed to take a break, cool off or chill out or whatever, I would write about what just happened as a means of processing it and letting it go so I could move on. And
Yeah.
so people were able to kind of follow along in real time. Uh, and it wasn't intended to be that way, but that's just sort of how it
Yeah.
turned out at the time. It's been a lifesaver for me. And I know that it's helped a lot of people, but I don't know that people understand just how much the connection and interaction helped me to survive. And I'm 25 years in now. I don't know that I would have made it had I not had this as like a touchstone or a sounding board or an outlet.
Yeah. Well, you created a tribe. You created a sense of community for you and for everyone else that became a part of it. And I think that that is one of the most important things when you get a diagnosis for your child. I tell every parent, we are now, as a practice, and myself personally as a mom, and some of my other staff as autism parents, because a lot of the individuals that work at the Adult and Pediatric Institute, we have neurodivergent kids, whether that's autism, whether that's ADHD. And so we've all been there. And so we tell these families, we're now a part of your tribe, but it is so important to find a support group, find more people that are on different parts of the journey to help lift you up. And everyone has a different story and everyone's going through different things with their kids, but just having that tribe, having that sounding board that'll safe space for you to be able to say, today was really hard and today sucked. Today it was really hard being their parent today. I don't know how I got through it. I don't know how I survived today. And you created that.
My youngest will tell you that I ended up ultimately creating the resource that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just been a, you know, a journey.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Um and my kids are doing really well. Compared, if you had asked me 5 years ago if my kids would be where they are today, especially my oldest, I would be, there's no way. Like I just wouldn't, I wasn't able to see it as a possibility. But um yeah, I mean, my kids are doing well. It doesn't mean that,
That's amazing.
and to be clear, like, it doesn't mean that we're without challenge, because every day is a challenge.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
as they get older, it evolves into different things. So we're not dealing with meltdowns anymore. We're not too crazy with the sensory stuff anymore. But there's challenges as they become adults, because now things that were acceptable when they were kids, the world does not accept in adults. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of challenges that we're navigating for the first time.
Yeah, and what you said about, like, asking you 5 years ago, if, you couldn't see it, and you
Mhm.
couldn't even imagine where they are today. I feel that way. I feel that way a lot when I hear people like you who are further on in the journey than what I am. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so I can't even picture where we'll be or where they will be a year from now, let alone when they're adults. And so hearing other parents that have overcame a lot of the struggles that I know are ahead of me. Puberty, right? Normal adolescent, pre-adolescent puberty
Sure.
that every parent goes through.
Yep.
When you're going through that with a child with autism, it's way more convoluted and sensory stuff comes up. Thankfully, you had boys, which I could see that being its own problem later on in life. But with girls, that's really tough. And it's, I'm so in the weeds right now. And so hearing your story and hearing how you talk about your boys gives me hope to say, okay, he overcame a lot of this. And there's a lot of great parents out there that also overcame this. And so let me learn from them. So again, just even more validation for what you're doing and how much you're helping people that are earlier on in the journey to learn from you and what worked and what didn't work.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and everybody's journey is different, obviously. But
Yes.
I mean, there are overlaps. And just seeing that someone else has gone through really difficult times and it's worked out okay. Like, my youngest didn't speak till he was 4.5. We were told that he would never talk.
Uh-huh.
And they even told us that he was deaf. He failed all of his hearing screenings except his ABR, where they sedate him and put electrodes, measure brain activity to see if he's processing
Uh-huh.
sound. That's how he ultimately went or pointed in the direction of autism, because he was just ignoring or tuning everybody out. Um, but he started talking at 4.5, like he'd been talking. He just woke up one morning. It was full conversational speech, like he had been talking his whole life. He just started his senior year in high school, but he's in college full time. This is his second year of college full time.
Wow.
So he'll end up with an associate's degree before he graduates high school. If you had told me
That's
back then
amazing.
that he would be able to do those things, and it's not that I didn't believe in my kids, it was just that this is what we're told in the appointments. And, you know, Gavin was never supposed to do any of the stuff that he's doing. All right.
Yeah.
We can get caught up in the day to day struggles. It's easy for us to assume that this is what the rest of our lives are going to look like. And that isn't how it works. The future is not predetermined, and our kids, with help and love and support, can do all kinds of stuff. You
Yeah.
just have to
And
find be different paths. But
yeah, and I do think that there's a certain protective mechanism there to a degree, right? And so you're managing your expectations. And once you kind of move past that grieving stage, which it can come back up again, by the way, just for anyone listening. I think what some of the TV shows and movies and things like that show you to be true regarding grief, it's not
Mhm.
true, right? So whether we're talking about a loved one passing, whether we're talking about a loss of a job or something, anything in general, the grieving process it tends to be a little bit more cyclical. And so, you can kind of go through that anger, sadness, acceptance, and then wash, rinse, wash, repeat
Hmm.
later on also. And it comes up again. And so I think once you've kind of gotten a little bit past that and you're entering into an area where you're at the acceptance stage, you start to manage your expectations as a protective factor. Where, you know what? It's okay. They are who they are. I'm going to keep doing everything that I can to help them reach their full potential. But maybe they will never talk, and that needs to be okay. Or maybe they will never get married or have a job, and that needs to be okay. So then when they do it, it's just huge and you celebrate that win, but you're also not setting yourself up for failure or your child up for failure to say, well, you didn't do it and therefore I'm upset. Does that make sense? Like, I think
Perfect.
it's
Oh yeah,
protective to a degree.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. And my younger one, very similar to how you describe your younger son. I think you had said it was Elliot, right? That didn't speak until he was
Emmett.
Emmett. Okay.
And
The
that's okay. I get
youngest.
them confused all the
Okay.
I
You
get the
named them
names
both
mixed up
with
all the time.
E's.
I know.
This is like
Well,
twins,
and
people with twins and they dress them the same. I'm like, you're just
yeah.
setting everyone up for failure here.
Well, they start with an E, end with a T. There's T's and yeah.
Yeah,
It's
there's
it's
duplicate letters. Yeah.
yeah.
So with Emmett, my younger one was very similar to that, where by the age, I actually just made a post about this, of at 3, she wasn't really talking. She would say maybe a handful of meaningful words. The rest was mostly just noises, to the point where at her daycare, she went to a Montessori school. They thought she was completely nonverbal. And they heard her say something to another little kid, and they're like, oh my God, she can actually talk. And she had tubes in her ears because we thought she was deaf. And
Yeah.
then when her older sister got diagnosed, and I was talking about her with the psychologist that diagnosed her older sister, she's like, I don't know. This sounds like autism. And that sent me down a whole nother path because at that point she had tubes and she was passing every hearing exam. So now it's like, okay, now what? So she's not deaf. So now what? And then, yeah, she got into the right setting in school and she was like 3.5, 4. And all of a sudden, overnight, she's talking in full sentences. And we're like, oh my God, where did this kid come from? Who is this kid? And it just happened overnight. And right around that time, she was also getting ABA. And so all of these things kind of went together. Hindsight's 2020. So looking back on it, I see like, okay, we did X, Y, and Z, and we were working with these people and we had acknowledged this. And so I think all of those kind of early intervention services that we had put into place helped lead her to develop language and meaningful language that resonates with me, and I can empathize with how that feels. And that in and of itself, it's a grieving process. Are they ever going to talk? Are they ever going to get a job? If they don't talk, can they get a job? You don't know. And so it's kind of scary, all of those unknowns.
Yep. Well, and when you get a diagnosis, this is my biggest pet peeve. And I hear this from parents. It doesn't matter what country they live in or what part of the world they live in. They get a diagnosis, they're given a piece of paper or a pamphlet or a folder of whatever, and then they're kind of escorted out the door. And,
Yeah.
they're trying to just process what just happened. Their whole world's imploded, right? And
Yeah.
we think that the report of where they are right now is a predictor of the future. And a lot of times it isn't. It's just a baseline so that we can measure progress going forward. And the labels, nobody likes the labels, but in this country at least, it's how we get insurance to pay for things, for one thing.
Yeah.
But
Unfortunately.
it's also how we match up a need with a resource and a
Hmm.
service, you know? But we just don't do a good enough job.
Coaching
Well,
families
in explaining that, there's
afterwards.
no
Yeah.
emotional support.
Yeah.
I've had someone compare it to like, being shoved off a cliff and told to find a parachute on the way down.
Yeah.
And it's what it feels like. It's a great analogy, you know?
It really is. That oh my gosh, yes. And again, I've said this before, like when I talk about my story, I talk about when they told me my older daughter had autism, in my head, it felt like they had just told me she had leukemia. Because
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
I can't fix this. I can't fix this. This is a lifelong life sentence for you. I can't fix this. And I know that sounds harsh to some people. And again, kind of going back to what you said, it's very taboo to talk about your real feelings. But in that moment, to me, it felt like someone had just given my daughter a life sentence. And I'm like, what do I do with this?
Well,
And it's so isolating and lonely and scary.
yeah, you know, you walk out of there because everything is just dumped on you,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I get it. Like, we're, you know, there's a revolving door of people coming in and out of, you know, clinics or whatever. But like, it just feels like it's very mechanical, in the sense that
It feels
they get
sterile.
well, yeah, it's like a white paper or something, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very clinical, and there's no emotional support. And that doesn't mean that there's not places out there that are doing a really good job at this. It's just my experience,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
what I hear from a lot of other parents. And I don't think it's done with the intention of being cold or anything like that, but it's just like it's just very clinical. And it's like, okay, so your kid's
Yeah.
probably not going to talk, you know, so you're going to want to start learning sign language, or use a device, or whatever the deal is. And so parents leave that appointment thinking, well, this person knows way more about this than I do, and they're telling me that he's never going to talk. So you
Yeah.
just start to assume, okay, he's never going to talk, and that's how you start planning out the rest of your life. When in reality, well, there's a lot of kids that are never supposed to speak or predicted to never speak that end up developing language. And even if it's not just language, it's communication in some form, right? Because speech
Yeah.
is just one form of communication. I know when my youngest started to talk, he woke up one day and he just started talking about the dog. That was the first thing that he said. And I remember being freaked out by it, because
Yeah.
I assumed that if he was ever going to talk, it would be like a baby learning to talk. Even if he was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, he would start babbling, or there would be like,
Yeah.
you know,
Some
trying to,
progression into
yeah.
sentences and
And,
meaningful
and
words.
nope, he was just talking like he'd been talking his whole life. And it just, it freaked me out because I didn't know what to do. They didn't prepare me for that. They had made me feel like that's just the way that it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then he just goes and sort of defies the odds. And all of my kids have done that in some way, shape, or form. And I wish we did a better job of preparing parents in the moment,
Oh, 100%.
because I think the outcomes would be better if you instill hope, and not false hope, but like, things get better.
But
Better is
hope.
relative, right? It
Yeah.
could be different for anybody, but it's still new skills are learned, coping mechanisms. Maybe there's new therapies that come out. Maybe there's underlying medical conditions that you didn't know
Can
about, that
address.
maybe that
Yeah.
you can address down the road, right? Or, um, you know, Gavin has had complete, you know, genome and exome sequencing done, and everything's always come back normal, which is bizarre because he has so many health issues.
Mhm.
Um, and then, you know, someday, because as science evolves and medicine evolves, they run, you know, his sequencing against, you know, updated knowledge bases or whatever. And at some point there might be a flag that comes up and says, hey, we just identified this, and this is something that maybe we can help him with.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, there's no way to
No, and
truly
I
predict
yeah.
the future.
Yeah, and I honestly believe, I got told early on in my career, one of the worst things that you can ever do for a patient is to take away their hope.
Yeah.
And so, although I don't believe in giving false hope either,
Yes.
we sit with clients after we've evaluated and gone over the diagnosis, and we just sit, and then we'll schedule follow-up meetings with them, and what questions do you have, what support do you need, and we remain in contact with these families long after we have diagnosed their child, just to provide support. Hey, if you're, we tell them, if you're running into barriers, if you're running into walls, finding resources, reach out. We are part of your tribe. That's what we are here to help you with. And I think having lived this experience myself is what helped me develop that, because it wasn't there when my daughter got diagnosed, or either of them. And the clinician who diagnosed her, amazing human. And if a client can't come to us, I'll refer them to her because she's just so empathetic and so sweet and so caring. But it's just, it's different. It's different when I'm developing this from firsthand knowledge of this is how I felt when I got that diagnosis and I didn't feel supported, and
Mm-hmm.
creating support groups and creating these things because I know I need it too. To this day, I still need it. I still need the support group. And so,
Yeah.
why would I think that it would be any different with our clients that we see, considering we're just not giving them that diagnosis? But yeah, like really just sitting down with them and going over questions. And I get a lot of,
Yeah.
will they ever talk? Will they ever be able to go to a traditional school? Will they ever? Will they ever? And unfortunately, I have to tell parents I can't predict the future. I tell them exactly everything that you said. There's been a lot of advances in different therapy modalities that I think that you should absolutely stay hopeful and try,
Mm-hmm.
considering, and I try to give them some concrete clinical evidence based off what we saw to
Mm-hmm.
say, look, considering the fact that they've been able to compensate, they know how to communicate with you despite having verbal communication abilities, that shows sign of higher level cognitive functioning. And so therefore, I think you should be hopeful that maybe one day they will learn to talk. Or talking, verbal communication, like you said, is not the only form of communication. I bring up Stephen Hawking. No, you know, he doesn't have verbal communication, not because of autism, uh, but nonetheless, he doesn't have verbal communication. He uses alternative forms of communication, and no one ever doubted that guy's intelligence and how
Yeah.
brilliant he is. And look at what he accomplished not having verbal communication. And so, even if they never have verbal communication, they'll still have some form of communication.
And
And
the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that when we have these milestone targets for kids, I mean, they're developed for neurotypical kids,
yes,
right? And so sometimes not every kid is on the same timeline,
no,
and it creates frustration. Where I know a lot of like pediatricians will be like, "Well, let's not stress out about it right now. Let's give him a little bit more time." And then parents are like, "Oh no, he's not hitting the milestones now," because we beat into the heads of parents that they're not talking by this age or they're not walking or scooting by this age. And there's a lot of nuance in all of this that just sort of gets glossed over, I think. I feel like if I could be in charge for like one day and make changes to one part of this, I think if we could help parents get started on this journey in a way that has supported them emotionally and helped them to really truly grasp the concept of what's happening,
yes,
um, that it can help them to just get off on the right foot. And instead of despair and trauma, it's hope. And okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And if they don't talk, well, we're going to find another way for them to communicate.
yep,
You know what I
we're
mean?
gonna
Like,
figure it out.
we're going to figure it out because, at the end of the day, people find their path. It's just not the one that maybe they had envisioned or mapped out previously. So it's
Yeah.
just, it's tough. And we could do so much better than what we're doing. We need to inject some humanity, I think, back
Oh,
into
yes.
it a little bit, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It absolutely
So,
does. And I think that it's humanity into the entire healthcare system. This isn't just dealing with kids with autism.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is every aspect of
It's a
our healthcare
systemic.
system. Yeah, it's become such a business and there's no more human in it, and it's a profit over people mindset
Mhm.
where everyone's just a number. But in reality, these people are coming to see you because they're scared and they're in pain, whether that's emotional pain or physical pain. Stop, take a beat, think about what the person on the other side of those scrubs are going through and put yourself in their shoes and show some real empathy and take that extra couple of minutes to just show them the human side of you and acknowledge that they're a human. They're not just a medical record.
Yeah,
And
that's a good.
especially with autism, that this is a really big moment in their life. I will never forget the day that both of my daughters got diagnosed. This was a big milestone event in our family's history.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when people think back to the days that we had to give them an autism diagnosis, that they can remember feeling supported and seen and non-judged, that they had a platform to say all of the things that were going through their head, even if it is taboo. And you're doing that, Rob. And you said, if you could just be in charge for a day, that's one of the things that you would change. That is what you're doing. Sully, right? The guy who I talked about in the beginning, he's listening to your podcast and you're helping him come to terms with his children's diagnosis. So you are doing that. So I say give yourself some credit because you're doing that
Thank you. I
for
appreciate that.
people. Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
making a difference. So what what do you kind of have on the future? What projects or efforts for the Autism Dad platform do you have? Where do you see that going?
Uh, well, I mean, I don't always think like too far out in the future because I just have never really been able to do that with everything going on.
Hmm.
But there's no end in sight at this point, and kids are getting diagnosed more and more frequently. There's always a need for continued support, and I do some speaking things now as my kids have become more independent, and things that require travel. I've been able to do more of, but I think it's just sort of listening to what parents are needing and trying to meet those needs. We're in a time right now where parents are scared
Yeah.
and worried about the direction that healthcare, for example, is going in. And it's about building bridges and keeping people unified and not losing hope and connections. It's just kind of meeting people where they are and continuing to allow what I have learned along the way and what my experiences have been to help other people maybe navigate some of their own.
What are some of the biggest barriers that you feel like you have kind of come across? And then I'd also like to get your take on what you think parents are struggling with the most right now.
I think for me, probably the one of the biggest challenges was becoming a single parent
Yeah.
and having to take on all the responsibility on my own because their mom hasn't been involved in our lives in a long time. So it is hard not having backup, I guess,
Yeah.
or being able to at least co-parent with somebody. I think a lot of the struggle for the parents that I'm talking to all the time, it's resources. In Ohio, there's like a 3-year wait list to get your kid diagnosed or evaluated. And I mean,
Jeez.
that's insane. It is
That is
absolutely insane.
insane.
And now there's, massive funding cuts coming. So the
Yeah.
already limited resources are going to become even more limited. People are going to be losing insurance,
Yeah.
so they're going to have to pay out of pocket for things. So there's going to be kids who are going undiagnosed because they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hearing that from, I don't know how many people I hear from. I mean, it's just this influx of fear about
Mm,
what the future holds. And when you have a kid diagnosed with any disability,
mm,
you already fear the future, right? Even if everything in your life is going great and you have the financial resources and you have supports and whatever, you still fear the future. But take away all those supports,
Yeah.
and you feel like you're dropped in the middle of the ocean, and there's no land in sight. There's no rescue boats coming, and all they're doing is tying weights to your ankles, and you're expected to keep afloat, not only yourself but your kids.
Yeah.
It's a scary time, and parents in our situation are very vulnerable,
Yes.
and
They
you know
just
it,
want to help their kid.
they just want to help their kids. There should be nothing political about autism at all, and it's just heartbreaking to see what people are going through right now, and
Yeah. And what it's turning into.
what it's turning into. And at the end of the day, it's our kids that are going to pay the price.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's our entire country, right? Because autistic kids become autistic adults.
yes, they do.
And
Despite what other
so,
people, there's like this thing where
yeah,
like kids turn 18 and then they're just like
suddenly they're cured.
the autism fairy comes and like sprinkles some whatever in the middle of the night and no longer eat, they're no longer autistic, so they don't need services after
Yeah,
18. Like it is absolutely insane. It is absolutely insane.
it
You know,
really is.
the funding that is in place to help my son be, living his independent life is in jeopardy,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, what do we do?
Uh,
I mean, he's on a waiver program that the federal government was supposed to match. The way it was working, my understanding was the federal government matches the state funding, you know,
mhm.
and if funding goes out or they lose funding, that pulls away from
The
him and
match,
other
and
kids
therefore
like
they
him.
won't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, they lose transportation, they lose job coaching. Uh, some people need, like, my kids have never needed like one-on-one aids or anything, but um, or we at least we've never utilized it. But there's a lot of kids like in the group homes that have, staffing that comes in. All that stuff
Yeah.
is, funded by
Well,
something.
and it's already getting cut.
Yeah.
That's what I'm dealing with right now on my end is I'm about to help testify on behalf of clients to get skilled nursing back and home health aides back and things like that because the insurance, it's just, and a lot of these kids that I'm seeing the struggle with, they're within DCF system, Department of Children and Families,
Yeah.
because they are either fostered or adopted. And so
Hmm.
therefore they get Medicaid and, until they're an adult. And those are the first services that we're seeing get cut. And it baffles me. Like God bless these angel parents that adopted a special needs child. That most of them, the ones that I've worked with, they knew they were special needs when they adopted
I
them.
was going to say, and you have those people out there who maybe don't know ahead of time and find out and still rise to the
And
occasion. And you have those
yeah,
people
and
who
still
know going into
exactly.
it.
Yeah, the ones that I've worked with, they knew or they suspected it, right? This was a child that when they were born detoxing off of heroin. And so they
Yeah.
suspected that there was going to be a fetal alcohol syndrome or some type of impact, yet still adopted them. And great, great people. And now you just pulled all their services. So, what is that going to do to the kids that are still in foster care? What's going to happen with those kids if these parents know or a precedence is getting set that these parents aren't going to have services to help them with these special needs kids?
Yeah.
So there's so much on the line here. And it feels like common sense is becoming less and less common.
Yeah. Well, and so my girlfriend and I, she's an autism mom too. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me aside from my kids. And I've been outspoken with the autism stuff forever, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to be careful, like what
Yeah.
you do and what you say. And you have to balance, you have parents. I've talked to parents who have had kids on a waiting list to be evaluated for years who have pulled them off because they're afraid they're going to be put on some list,
Yeah. When that
or
came out, we
registry.
had clients reach out to us asking, um, yeah, that
And
they were
it's,
really concerned about that.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, what do you do?
It's
I
just
mean,
baffling.
we just want to help our kids, and our kids being diagnosed with a disability doesn't affect their worth as a human being. They're not worth less because they don't talk or whatever the situation. They still bring a light to the world that no one else could bring.
Yes. Yes.
And we're shutting them down. It's hard enough
Too.
because parents in our situation have to deal with all of the same things for the most part that parents of neurotypical kids or kids without disabilities have to deal with, right? Just the everyday life stuff
Yeah.
on top of all of the add-ons that we
Yeah.
get. The chronic sleep deprivation, the anxiety, the mental health challenges that you get because you're just burnt out and
Yeah.
spent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Caregiver burnout is a real
huge,
thing. That is
huge
real.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently started speaking out about this just because, like, I'm not looking to put a target on myself or my family, but yeah, I mean, it's the future for my kids and how many other kids like them. And we have to put aside our differences. In this community, there's so many factions. You have high support needs and lower support needs, and you have people who believe in vaccines or don't believe in vaccines or therapies or diets or whatever their belief system is. And we all stand in these little boxes in this community, and we sort of forget that the other person's there, or we don't talk to them because they have a different belief system or they do something differently than whatever. But we're all on the same team. And
Yes.
we all fall into that category of autism. And this impacts all of us.
It
You know,
absolutely does.
we have to stand together, and it doesn't matter what color you associate with autism or puzzle piece or not puzzle piece. None of that stuff matters. Terminology doesn't matter. Language first versus person, or person first language doesn't matter. At the end of the day, none of it matters. If our kids are not getting diagnosed, if they're not getting the resources that they need to overcome some of these challenges or just to get through the day, and parents aren't getting funding and support that they need to keep their family above water while they're doing a job that requires superhuman abilities, and
Yeah.
they're just human,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So like we have to stand together regardless of what your political beliefs are or your ideology is.
It's not about that.
It's not
Yeah,
about
it's
that.
not about that. It's about humankind.
Yep.
And it's about exactly what you said. You hit the nail right on the head. They are still worthy. They're
Yeah.
still worthy of love and respect and quality care and the ability to be able to achieve the best that they could possibly achieve. Right. And without those supports, we're taking away that pursuit of the best possible life for them. Do right by these kids. Give them your time, give them your energy, give them resources. Oh,
Yeah. I mean,
like
I don't even know. It's such a frustrating thing.
our kids are being turned into political pawns. It's incredibly
Yeah.
frustrating. And they're
You know,
not. They're human beings.
and
Come
we're
on.
we're ignoring science and medicine and fact, and we're dehumanizing people.
Well, I
We can
will
do better,
say
guys.
one thing that I saw as another result, and this is going to hopefully instill hope. One thing that I did see after RFK Jr.'s talk, his press conference, and we started going down that route, is I saw a large amount of people like you and I come together, right? And
Yes.
so it was almost like a trauma bond
Yeah.
where we're all bonded in this. And I think that the people like you and I and the other hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people that aren't far one side or far the other side, they're somewhere kind of in the middle and they're looking at this from a perspective of common sense and they're saying, whoa, wait a second. Even if I don't know anything about this, something feels ucky here, right? Something doesn't feel right here. That is the majority. It's not the loud people on TV that are getting the
Correct.
media attention that the media makes you want to believe that, oh, well, everyone
We're not
has
in the
to be on
minority.
one side or the other. Yeah, like
Yeah,
no.
we're not in the minority.
No,
But
we're the majority.
there's a minority of people who hold power, and that's really what's happening. Well, if you have a sizable platform, you do have a responsibility to use it
Yeah.
and be on the right side of history. But also, we live in a time where it isn't just disagreements anymore. And I've had death threats
And we live in a
over the years.
cancel culture.
Yeah, and so you really have to be careful. Just even talking about the stuff that I've been doing for the last 20 years has become politicized. There's no way to avoid it.
So I recently had gotten interviewed for a magazine article about what it's like raising kids on the spectrum. And at the end of the interview, they asked me if you could have lunch with anyone, who would you like it to be? And it's funny, it probably sounds contradicting, but I had said RFK Jr. because I would love for him to come to my home and meet my kids and hear our story and
Mhm.
hear the struggles that I've had finding higher levels of care for not just my own kids, but also other clients and how it's not there and the trauma and what we've been through as a family, and whether or not that would change his mind, probably not, right? Who knows? But I think that there's real power in sharing your story and there's real
Yeah.
power in sharing the struggles that you've been through because it allows people to create unique solutions to solve these problems because of that press conference. Well, not just because of that, I was seeing it before that, but we're primarily with our autism evaluations, we don't bill insurance and we can't afford to. That's why we're able to spend so many hours with these clients and dedicate so much
Yeah.
time. But I recognize there's so many people that I'd hang up the phone and just cry because I knew they would never be able to afford us. And those stories is what led me to open a nonprofit foundation where I can
Yeah.
cover the costs and I seek funding. And there's amazing organizations and people out there that gave me the time of day to sit with them and say, this is a real problem. They don't deserve to only get access to good care because they have money.
Yeah.
And
There's
here's what's happening in our country. They need help. And they're more than willing to give money to help these people. So there
there
are
is
good people out there.
oh, absolutely. There is very few things worse than knowing that there is something that can help your kids, but you can't afford it,
Yeah.
right? I would rather there not be something than to know that it's there, but I can't afford it because then I feel like, oh my God, I am failing my kids. I'm not doing enough
Yes.
of this. I'm not doing enough of that. I wanted to just mention this too, because this is my big thing right now. And I put out a couple of videos about this since I have decided we're just going to speak out. uh,
Let's go. Let's do it.
there is a huge segment of our community who are, parents raising kids that have extremely high support needs, who feel unseen and unheard because they get brushed off, they get excluded. People don't like to think of autism more than anything more than quirky and weird.
Yeah.
And so you have someone like RFK Jr. and Donald Trump come into the picture and they start making statements, whether there's any factual basis to them or not. There is a segment of our community who is feeling seen and heard for the first time, and
Yes.
that's a problem. That is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Like we have failed this community. Everybody who falls under the umbrella of autism, whether they have high support needs, low support needs, or somewhere in the middle, belong. And we are all in this together. And we cannot allow Donald Trump and RFK Jr. and anybody who is promoting the stuff that they're doing to be the first time someone in our community feels seen and heard. That is a
Yeah.
huge problem.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of communication going on between parents that have kids in different places on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that leads to isolation. And then you have someone come along who makes these grandiose promises, and people who are not in those situations maybe have the bandwidth to be like, okay, you know what, this doesn't track. But you have people who are so desperate that they want finally someone sees us,
Yeah.
maybe they're going to help us. And then it's just exploitation
Yeah.
of a very desperate group of people. And it's just,
Well, and
we need to do
companies are
better.
doing that too.
The what?
Companies are doing that too.
Sure.
That's not just politicians doing that. It's companies are capitalizing on the trend and just really taking advantage of a vulnerable population.
Yep.
And
We got to
it's
stick together.
we really do. We have to come together and we have to hold people accountable.
Hmm.
I don't care what color you are when it comes to voting. I don't care what color you are in general, right? You're a human.
Yep.
You're a human. And it's about us coming together as Americans to say, this is how we want our country to look. This is how we want our country to behave. This is how we want it ran. And holding these politicians accountable, regardless, again, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care. I don't have the time in my life to get caught up in whether
Hmm.
you're red or blue. I just
Sure.
don't. It doesn't make any difference
Well,
to
you
me.
can even step back further and just be like, as parents,
Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I'm saying.
I
Like
know,
I'm
like,
in it.
uh,
I'm in the weeds. Like I'm in it
yeah,
right now.
as
Like I
parents,
just need you to do your job.
I don't want to see something happen that even if it doesn't impact my kids directly, but I know it's going to impact other people's kids. As
Yeah.
a parent, I cannot be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because how long before it does impact my kids? And not even like that's the only reason that you care, but like if for no other reason, right? Like i- we all want what's best for our kids. We all want our kids to live long, healthy, happy lives. We want them to be loved and accepted and contribute to the world in whatever way that they can. And in order to do that, some of our kids need help along the way.
We're
Uh,
not victims. We're not
no,
victims and we're not powerless. And we
no,
have a
not at all.
voice and we have the ability to affect positive change. And that's one of the things that I really, really try to like instill in people when they are feeling powerless is you are not powerless. Show up to your capital, get a
Hmm.
meeting with your elected officials because that's where it starts, right? It starts with local government and then it trickles up from there.
Yeah.
But when we
And
all
don't let
come
them divide
together,
us.
yes, and when we all come together, that's when our voice is the loudest. And there's
Yeah,
always going to be trolls and there's always going to be
sure.
naysayers. And that's okay. There's nothing I can do about that, right?
They're not the people you're going to reach,
They're not, and you never will.
and
And
that's okay.
but when we all come together, our voice is loud enough that it drowns out all of them.
If there's something positive that has come out of this so far, it's highlighted just how we have dropped the ball in our own community, and how we need to step up
Yeah.
and make sure that everyone is included and seen
Yeah.
and heard.
So the last thing I always like to do whenever I wrap up a podcast is I like to ask if you could give your younger self one or two pieces of advice, knowing what you know now, what would that be?
I guess I would tell myself that it was going to be okay. I never really had anybody tell me that it was going to be okay. Like my parents would always tell me that and stuff, but I never had anybody who has been through this tell me that it was going to be okay. Any advice that I could have given myself back then, aside from self care being a priority, it would be that it was going to be okay. And
Yeah.
okay doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy or without meltdowns or whatever, but you'll find your path. You'll forge that path forward. It's not always going to be heartache and frustration and exhaustion. You find the joy, and you will appreciate life. You just have to be open to what better is.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Rob, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Can you tell everyone where they can find your podcast, where they can find you, how to connect with you?
Sure. The easiest thing to do is just go to the autismdad.com. Um, Most people are using their like phones or tablets or whatever. So I built it so that it's, um,
Mobile friendly?
yeah, it's like a link tree thing, right? So you can just go to the homepage. It has, you can get everything else from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And hopefully, we get to hear a lot more about all the positive that you're doing in the future.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate, and thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I really appreciate that. Just, parent to parent too. Like it matters.
Thank you. Well, we're here for each other, right?
Yep.
Thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in for this podcast. We hope that you got a lot out of it and that you know that there is real power in sharing your stories. Go out and conquer your day.